Well, yeah, that's what I'm noticing. It's so many layers of issues that's going on now. Why people would actually think that the new generation of gamers or just games just sucks ass. What's going on, Jew? Like that's what I think. I think that there's a lot of contention with the way that gamers are looking at games. I think that older gamers, I'll say this again, because I am kind of like just running around in the video game world and just playing video games. I honestly think, like truthfully, that people don't want to, you know what I mean? Like it's hard for an older gamer to like transition into a new type of video game. It's hard for older people in general. Yes, we're getting older. It's hard for older people in general to try something different. If we don't want to try anything different. And like I said before, I'll reiterate what I was saying before. At the end of the day, a lot of gamers, older gamers, are so accustomed to the Western or the Eastern market dominating. And back in the PS3, a lot of developers almost croaked. That was it for them. That was it. There was a lot of consolidation in the PS3 or PS2 to PS3 era because a lot of their games they were trying their hardest to make a lot of games. The problem is, you know, well, a lot of them went under, and that's one of the reasons. Like, if you take a risk and try to do something different, you run risk of like tanking your whole company. Games are expensive, and so a lot of the times, what these new gamers, modern gamers, will look at is they're like, oh, I see what's going on. There's microtransactions everywhere. There's no heart to games. That just because you have a microtransaction don't mean that there's no heart. You know what I mean? That's just the bottom line. There's too many people that are so easy to dismiss a lot of different types of games. And that's another issue when it comes to gamers. They don't want to do anything new. And I'll say that again. They do not want to do anything new at all. At all. So they'll sit there and they will long for the games that they used to play and that they're good at. They'll long for that type of shit, yo. And then since the Western market is dominating the gaming industry, right? We don't get as many Japanese games out there. We don't get a lot of them. And so there's nothing a Western market game could do to impress someone that's used to that type of gameplay. There's no way. Oh shit, I'm my bad. I take a look at this shit every few moments. What's going on, bro? Yo, can you hear me?
Hey there, listen, how you doing? Happy
Yep.
New Year's, brother.
Happy New Year's, man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hey, I appreciate the conversation. I absolutely am in this category.
Which one? The older demographic that's used to
Oh,
West, that's used to Eastern.
older demographic, brother. And listen, I've had this discussion with people here recently too. Like, I think that our games were better than some of the stuff that we're doing now too. And I know that nostalgia is for every generation. When it comes to like gaming play mechanics and like just the fun factor, I think some of those games that we're moving away from that formula into something a little bit different with this live service stuff. And I look at it like I told you, I got like all the services. I got the Game Pass Ultimate. I've got the PlayStation Extra. I thought about whatever these kids would want to play most often. Is that Fortnite? And
Mm-hmm.
and then when they're not doing Fortnite, then they're doing Roblox. And then when they're not doing Roblox, so it's one of these things that I'm worried about this new generation of gamers that they might lose some of the in-depth experiences that we had growing up based on some of the where things are headed here. And I don't necessarily like where they're headed right now. And I know every generation probably thinks the same that theirs is the best, but brother, I don't know. Hopefully, I'm wrong here. What you think, bro?
I think you're right, and I think you're wrong at the same time. Personally, now that's just my opinion on it. And don't forget, like I'm 30, I'm 38 essentially, right? I'm gonna be 38
We
in
we
March,
we we in the same stratosphere. We in the same strat.
right? So I'm used to. I've been playing games for me, right? I think I really like 6, 7, 8 years old when you had the little Tiger toys, the little Tiger handhelds. You put two AA batteries in. Cause I couldn't. You can get them shits at like like at a not grocery store, but like at a pharmacy. You ever seen those things?
Oh yeah, my bad. I was muted. Yep. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
That's when I kind of really started. I'm not gonna sit there and be like, oh, I had ColecoVision and Atari. Like, I mean, I've seen those things, but back then, I was so jaded with graphics. I was like, what the fuck is this shit? So I already, I was looking at that. So my whole career in video games really started with those handhelds back in like 93, 94, 92.
Those were fire though. I remember I used to get those for Christmas time, man. Cause like you said, we wasn't necessarily getting an Atari or something like that. I remember, when I first did get a full system, Game Boy or actually no, it was an NES first. I remember when we first got one, we did get one. I think it was for Christmas, and man, that was one of the most joyous times of my childhood that I remember. But like other than that, though, before all that, we would get those little handheld joints. You know what I mean? And we would play those things for hours.
I had Paperboy.
Oh snap!
I had Paperboy. I burnt that game all the way out.
Mm-hmm.
That was my shit. The Paperboy game was my shit, right? So all right, fine, right? My first real console actually was a Game Boy. And then I had a Game Gear because I was a Sega fanboy back then before PlayStation. And then I had to clean my uncle's drawers in the house for almost an entire summer so I can get my PlayStation, my first PlayStation. And
first PlayStation, PS1.
PS1. It was so old, in fact. Like how you had that one input that you could just plug into, and it was just like a universal input in the back, right? And then you had the other one. Bro, I had the composite yellow, red, and white directly in the back of the PS1. I had one of the rarest PlayStations out there. You know what I'm saying? And it was like one of the first copies there. I didn't even have enough money for DualShock, because back then you didn't have it didn't come with it didn't have the sticks or vibration, which I didn't care. You know what I mean? We would get the cheap ass controllers that was like maybe $20 and it never felt right and it would break easy, or sometimes it'd be durable, but they were so uncomfortable to hold, that type of shit. So I had that shit going on, and this is where I think you go wrong along with everybody else. If you look at the human psyche, right, and just how we process information, as you know, as we get older, right, it becomes increasingly difficult to do new things. It's very difficult to do new things. So a lot of the times, low key, we really want to just keep doing the same thing over and over. We're creatures of habit, right? As long as you can remix it, it'll be fine for us, right? And remember, the Western or the Eastern market was dominated the industry. It was Japanese games all over the place, and barely any Western games or anything else. You had the big game that was from the West, which is really the UK and London, which was Tomb Raider, and that had to go against fucking all the other Japanese platformers and stuff like that. Which, there's situations like that. All right, cool, right? But most of the market was Japanese. Now, if you remember, when they moved from the PS1 to the PS2, the industry it was fucked up. There were a lot of consolidation with a lot of Japanese companies that stopped them from going under. Yeah, if I don't fit, you had SquareSoft fucking up, making that movie that was extremely expensive, almost tanked the company, and they asked Sony to help them out and bail them. And then they went and merged with Enix to create Square Enix. There was so much of that going on. Namco was just his own company. They were messing up too. The Tekken series was really expensive, so they had to, combine with Bandai and shit like that, because it was just called Namco back then, And I think during the process of that combination, that process of the Eastern market getting like wrecked because they couldn't adapt to the crazy blooming expenses for video games, that's when the West started making their own shit, especially with Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto changed the whole landscape, and everybody wanted to do sandbox games. Now, That's the crazy part to this, right? Because now anybody that like Eastern games, Japanese games, there was a huge deficit. Now we had all these companies trying to mimic Grand Theft Auto success, and we didn't get our fixings for the Japanese games. Are you still there? Did he fall out? Oh, he's back to a listener. I wonder what happened. Let me invite him to speak. There we go. Hold on. All right. You there?
Yeah, that was Twitter acting up again, trying to ruin everybody's fun.
All I'm saying is this, to consolidate my bags, I was really being wordy. Back in the 90s or 80s, the late 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s was all Japanese games. The gaming development became extremely expensive, and the way that Japanese made their games wasn't as efficient as it could have been. And so a lot of these companies started going under, or they had to consolidate. They had to merge with each other, like Square Enix and stuff like that, which dropped the Japanese gaming count, in the West. So there was a lot of Western games that came out, especially after Grand Theft Auto, when people could see that you can make an open world game, and you know what I mean, and you make a lot of money, and it got popular, and the violence and all this other stuff. It was juxtaposed to the Japanese fantasy games. So the whole culture of video games shifted major back in 2001. It was a major fucking shift. You know what I mean? Younger people were jumping into gaming and all sorts of things. All right, cool. So you had that situation going on. All right, whatever. But I think that the people that the thing that it affects the most, the people that it affects the most are the people that are older gamers like us, because the culture is different. We have to come to grips with all these Western games and barely any Eastern games or Japanese games. And I think we're misconstruing that as actually, like, we there's a lack of variety or lack of soul, whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean? Because we are so jaded into liking what we've always liked, and on top of it, being older, we are creatures of habit. The Western games and Eastern games do not play the same, and so like it was a comfort knowing that we can pick up a Japanese game and it played relatively similar. These other games don't play similar, you know what I mean? So now we're going into another renaissance. So we got these people that say that they're disenchanted with video games, which are us, the older gamers. Oh, it feels like it's just the same games over and over again. But we also, with the same face, refuse to do anything different. And anything that's different that comes out, we refuse to give them their accolades as well, because it's not the Japanese games that we're typically used to, or the lighthearted games that we typically get used to. What do you think about that?
No, I mean, I know what you mean there, but I think that there's some tangible also things to consider too. Like when I think a lot more of the newer games that are coming out are less gameplay. And I'm not talking about like the bangers like God of War and some of these bangers. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about like some of the mainstreamer games where your environments are less interactive than they were measurably, like tangibly. You could do stuff in these older environments. Like we talked about this with Battlefield. The first Battlefield games, like you could do anything you wanted with a building, with any building you could take down, and if you look at the most recent rendition of it, the 2042, I mean, it's just the cheese of it, like the environments are getting measurably less interactive in some cases, not every case, right? But in some cases, then they're focused more on high fidelity, visuals and that kind of thing, which has its place, right? But I think when it comes down to what makes a game fun, some of the things that we think that make a game fun are actually more depth. They're more in depth. I don't necessarily want to be on rails, running through somebody else's beautiful world. I don't mind doing that, but I prefer to have my own experience in your world. You know what I mean? So and that's where I think some of the older games capture that freedom, and that's why I think Elden Ring took off so well, and that's why I got lost with 300 hours in that game, because it brought some of that back to me, where the freedom of exploration, and you can feel like you can do anything. Now the environments were still not as interactive as they used to be, but it was on a different a different kind of a game. But I just wonder if that is a step backwards. Like I look at games like Tenchu, wait on that PS1, like all the stuff that you could do, with your environment there. If you saw it, you could probably get to it, right? If you saw a ledge up there or a tree or something, you could probably, plan to do something. And that's what I loved about those older games and older concepts, is that it seemed like a lot more thought was put into them than some of the more run-of-the-mill stuff that's coming out now. But again, that's not everything. Cause we getting ready to get, Tears of the Kingdom, and those environments are going to be just like what we remember. They're going to be well thought out, measurably different than some of the stuff that you get, like even in like the Horizon Forbidden West. You know what I mean?
Okay, so let me say this, right? I used to do some programming. I did major research on how games work, right? And I think that a lot of casual gamers. When I say casual, I'm not talking about like literally casual, but like people that just jump into gaming. They don't understand the difficulty in balancing graphics, right? Which is the reason why you get a new console, and interactivity.
Yep.
The more complex you have, because it's all shapes essentially, right?
Absolutely.
And so
polygons. Yep.
Yeah, you got it. So if you have more polygons to make your characters detailed, then you have to take away from the world itself. You know what I mean? So there's a balance. You either have detailed characters in a limited world, such as like Uncharted 1 and 2 and 3, or you're going to have a game that doesn't look that great, but it's an open world game. You know what I'm saying? Because you only have so many polygons to work with. So that's one of the things that's going on in terms of the Levolution of the what do you call it? The Battlefield games is what they called it. What DICE used to call it.
Yeah.
These buildings were generic buildings, like basically rectangular prisms, right? And so they have models. So like when you trigger the building to fall, it will swap the models and have particle triggers to make it look like the building is collapsing. But in the process, it swaps the models from one state to the other. The problem here is that you have to keep those models in memory. And the simpler the models, the more you can keep in memory, so it can swap in between the two instead of loading the models from the disk or hard disk drive.
Now these models that they got now are complex.
They're complex. So now
I know what you mean.
Now you got an issue. Now you got a big issue. You know what I'm saying? Now with this particular generation, especially with the SSD and et cetera, I'm not gonna get into Mark Cerny and shit. You have the ability to do it in the way, the paradigm of how they used to do games in the past is going to be different from later on in the generation. The whole system is going to be different, and they need time to kind of figure that out. But I guess to get to the crux of the situation, when it comes to Zelda, Zelda is going to play a lot like fucking Breath of the Wild, with some added stuff. Now, when people say that Horizon is kind of linear, and I'm like, well, you can fly on that damn pterodactyl anywhere. So
not linear, no, it's definitely not linear. No, open world. That game's a pure open world game for sure. But what I think that people talk about is that and obviously Zelda, you could chop down any tree, you could do whatever to anything obviously other than a mountain that you can think of, especially when you start exploding stuff. And it seems like everything was interactive, and it felt like the original Horizon Zero Dawn, because that's when those first two kind of came out, and they had that pretty much of two different games, that illustrated kind of what we're currently talking about. And I feel like Zelda kind of went back to another one of those older mantras where you can go and interact with anything. Anything you can just conceive of, try to blend in potions together, see what you can come up with. It just brought that gameplay
experimentation and just like making logical sense in your head. And when it comes to Elden Ring, what you're referring to, for anybody that doesn't know, is level design. even though Elden Ring is an open world, let me see if anybody want to jump in there. Or am I tripping? No, no one wants to jump in there. Even when it comes to when you have what do you call it, Elden Ring or whatever the case is, they have to craft a level. So when you go through a level, they have to kind of create like a story as to how would this person receive this area when they first see it. Where would their eyes like direct, where would their eyes like lead
Yeah.
to when they look at something? And back in the day, they used to have like different color lights. You know what I'm saying? So when you walk into an area, right, you instantly was like, oh, what's that over there? You will be led without arrows and and things like that. So you'd be led like that. That's how that would work. But now, you instead of the developers actually creating levels, and like level design, they could just be like, okay, I could just create an organic level and use AI to like basically fill in the blinks, which is what a lot of these games
Procedural,
do.
yeah, procedural generation, yep, yep.
Right? And then they were like, I don't need to do like lights and stuff like that. I could just basically put an arrow there, and then you could just figure it out on your own. And that's where we're feeling something is wrong. You know what I mean? Because it is partially AI is crafting these environments. You know what I mean? And no one's going back into it. Like Horizon has a little bit of this. You know what I mean? And I say this because they do plan out the levels because they're old school developers as well. But the amount, you have to keep it realistic, so it wouldn't look normal if it was something glowing in the background just for no reason, like a light source was just placed in there without a light being there, or just something fell and there's just something is highlighting the area or whatever the case is. Ubisoft games does this a lot where the games are almost completely generated with like fucking AI. And you'll see like this situation where a lot of these games that are open world, they generate these open world games and it's nothing but fields of grass. You know what I'm saying? And they have like a system here that
Yeah.
would randomly generate trees all over the place. You know what I'm saying? Where the developer doesn't have to handcraft it. And they have this in Zelda. There's a lot of empty space in Zelda, but what they had a game plan when they made this game, and the game plan was literally like the chemistry system, which is how you can you can mix and match different physical properties of the video game. Like fire always will have create like an updraft if you burn something. So if you are hovering over this, paraglider is going to uplift you or whatever the case is. Water textures are always going to create blocks of ice if you have like the spell to it. You know what I'm saying? Those particular things. And these trees that are randomly generated, it's not like you can cut this tree down, go all the way from one side of the map and come back, and that tree is still cut down because it's procedurally generated. That tree would never be in the same place. Every time you go into that area, it generates it randomly. But they still have the physics of the tree being chopped down. You can get items, like materials and stuff like that from it. So they have a really nice blend. I don't particularly think that the innovation was, not having an icon. I think the innovation with that game, by the way, Zelda, I think the innovation was actually what was it? The innovation was actually the fact that they allow you to experiment with the game physics and the game logic, I should say, not physics, but the game logic, and not tie you down to specific. Like in Horizon Forbidden West, right? They have like these ruins, and you can only solve these ruins in a particular way because it was designed in a way where it wasn't coherent to the game's logic. You know, so it wasn't tightly. You couldn't just organically solve the puzzle. You had to do it their way, and it felt weird.
Yep. I know what you mean there, brother.
So I know my shit. I'm a vulgar ass motherfucker, yo. But I know my shit. The problem here, like I said before, I still think that's why I say right and wrong, because I do think that we are still jaded. We're still jaded as older gamers, that we don't want to try anything else, and we think that we know best. The problem here is that we are getting older. Our senses are becoming duller. You know what I'm saying? We're not going to be able to hang with the younger people, period. And then we're going to get pissed off with, when the younger people come and wreck your shit. That's just what it is, and that's a reality that you got to deal with.
Brother, let me tell you how much you hurt my heart there. I'll be still playing basketball with these folks, and yeah, and obviously I can still got my old man game and stuff like that. But I see these these younger kids that can jump and everything again, and I'm like, if y'all just do, if we could go rewind that clock 25 years. But no, listen, what you're saying is real. I do think that older gamers get stuck in a way. We want the same games from our youth. We probably are less, but less willing to try new things. Now I'm gonna say there's one other thing. I've actually been getting a lot of some of the dopest experiences in my games by playing stuff that I wouldn't have played before. Like I would have never picked up a game like Octopath Traveler and spent 200 hours in this freaking game, or however many hours this is in there now. I would have never done that, and so I think that learning new experiences is actually absolutely something that that can still happen. There's other like I do play Fortnite with the boys. I understand, kind of.
It's a good game. I'm so tired of these people. It's a good game.
It's a good game, man. It's just listen. If you see it on your TV, like 24, that's the only thing. Like that's where you're probably hearing that irritation because these kids, brother. These kids, that's what they, because I'm good with it. Like I can actually play with them a few rounds, but like when that's all you want to play, like no, we're limiting that.
No, because they keep you wanting to play that game over and over, and it's basically like a metaverse. You know what I mean? Where you could talk to people, you could trash talk and stuff like that. But mechanically, it's a very good game. And the reason why, that's one of the reasons. Let me not hurt your heart. Here's a Band-Aid, motherfucker. Right? You're going to.
I appreciate you, brother. Listen, I've been through a lot these last couple of days, so I appreciate
that. Look, here's a Band-Aid, bro. The reason why these young kids are so good is that's all they play. Is one specific game. You know what I'm saying? If anybody continues to play one game over and over again, you're going to find out all of its secrets, and you're going to learn how to do it. But also, when you get older, you get smarter and harder. Most of those Japanese games, you can even look at, for the Chinese, you can look at Kung Fu and stuff like that, right? Them motherfuckers are not trying to stand toe-to-toe with somebody that can beat their ass. Notice how old Kung Fu masters barely fucking move. That's too much energy. You know what I mean? I'll use your own energy against you. So, like, as we get older, we get smarter. So that's the trade-off. You know what I'm saying? All that energy you have and stuff like that, sometimes you could just sit there and wait. Like, you play Call of Duty. Sometimes you could just sit there and wait. I know you're going to run in here raggedy, thinking you know it, and I'll just pop you in your head and keep it moving. You know what I'm saying? I didn't even have to do all that hooting and hollering. You know what I'm saying? I know.
That's exactly right. That's exactly you hitting it. You hitting it right now.
I know exactly how this is going to go because I've played it enough and I played games enough to know that you're going to come here, and I don't need to do anything but just wait. Not camper wait, but I just know how the flow of the game is going to be. You just wait. You know what I mean? Fortnite is a little bit more dynamic and stuff like that, but it's the jadedness and the disrespect and just the disingenuous and just the dismissiveness of a lot of older gamers that don't want to try anything else but Japanese games. The point that I'm trying to make, right, is actually not the fact that we're getting older or that the games are getting worse, because guess what? We have more games nowadays than we ever had. Think about PlayStation 1, man. There's the Final Fantasies and then the Marios, you know what I'm saying? And you know what I mean? We just played the best of the best, and the other games were fucking shovelware. Now we got a lot of contending games, a lot of competition, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of competition where there's a whole bunch of shit to play. We got AAA, we got AA, AAA, quadruple A, you know what I mean? We got free to play, we got, games as a service, we got all sorts of crazy games nowadays. So we're going to have trash games in the midst of all those games being played. You can even look at how many game sales that are happening. It's been increasing every generation. That we make the more it goes on, the more games are being made versus what it was in the past. So you're going to have trash eventually somewhere, and a lot of it because more games are being made. That's just what it is. So you can't call every game like that like trash, but like our expectations are through the flipping roof. You know what I'm saying? It's through the roof. And because we're so pampered into thinking that every game is going to be a new experience and we don't like it when something is similar. But you can only do but certain things in the game. You can only do but so you can't do that much. What else? I mean, you can't reinvent the wheel. It's already been done. You know what I'm saying? If you played games back in the day, we had 2D to 3D, right? 2D to 3D was a massive upgrade, and we had to learn how to move the characters around, right? And then we went from 3D games to basically open world games, where we never had that experience before ever. And then what now? We just get better games instead of, instead of new experiences. Because we already reached the threshold
Yeah.
of, we've reached the threshold of basically what we can really do with the medium. You know what I mean? So that's just what it is. We just got to have an open mind when it comes to this stuff. And I think, like I said before, a lot of gamers are Japanese centric. And what I mean by that is that we expect Japanese games. And for the longest, for a generation and a half, they weren't putting in a lot of work. They were trying to repair themselves, and they managed to repair themselves. And it makes us feel salty because we're used to it. You remember Creature of Habit and all that stuff, right? They make games in a certain way. They skip animations, you know what I'm saying? They don't worry about physics really. They don't really care about any of that shit. But Western games, they care about physics and the hair needs to move this way and stuff. It's just a whole different way of playing games. A whole different way of playing games, and we feel like something's missing because the Japanese people or Japanese developers are just now getting into their strive again. We're just now getting that. So that's what's happening. That's part of the issue was happening. There are some shovelware stuff that we're still dealing with, and not to discredit what you were saying. A lot of these games, because even with Grand Theft Auto, when Grand Theft Auto came out back in 2001, the 3D one,
I remember.
there were so many copycats. What was the True Crime? That was one of them.
True crime, yo.
The Getaway was another one of them. Jack 2 was an open world game. Like everybody was doing it. Everybody was doing it. Because they all wanted that piece of that, that popularity. Like they all wanted that. And that's fine. I just feel like most older gamers need to open. If you're going to be a gamer, be a gamer. You can't have a closed mind with these games.